Good afternoon, guys. Yeah, it's afternoon now. Welcome to today and today's random bits during our little holiday season here that concludes tomorrow for me. Glad you're here. Man, the cold weather gets the bronchitis up a bit. I'm Marshall Burtcher, and I help codependents rediscover themselves, create happy relationships by healing the trauma bond. That's what I'm about. I'm also a little off my game today just because brain's still in a bit of a holiday mode. So before we get this started, I need to share this out to the community, which will, let's see, let me go do the thingy. The community is where you will find guidance and support and understanding in your experience. You may also find that you're challenged in the community, challenged to understand how you're communicating your support, your empathy, challenged to look at your own role in your life, because codependency is a bit of us and them, right? It's a relating system, and so it has to deal with how we are relating with each other. And I work to help the community be a place where we can learn to relate differently with each other, to receive feedback, to offer help in a constructive way, to learn how to have what I call safe and compassionate communication. So the link is above on Facebook, below on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you join, there are rules to communication, and be blunt, I expect them to be followed. As that helps create safety and understanding in a community where we're dealing with very delicate things. We're dealing with people's experiences. We're dealing with children going no contact. We're dealing with parents that are wrestling with their own estrangement. We're dealing with toxic dynamics, and we confront some of those because some of those we've absorbed. We've absorbed poor communication skills. We've absorbed reactionary approaches to things. We have to confront our own habits in fixing other people's pain and really learn how to do the opposite, which would be holding space and allowing people to explore their reality rather than get them to see ours. So and this really leads into this idea of the messy that communication is. Communication is a messy thing because we're coming from different contexts with a particular topic, for instance. So if someone mentions, someone mentions spaghetti and how much they just love spaghetti. They just, it's their thing. And I come into the conversation, I'm like, personally, my context with spaghetti isn't great. That's all we ate after my mother died, so I have a very emotionally associative experience with it. I didn't eat spaghetti for almost 23 years because of that association. And so if someone's like, man, I love spaghetti, but I haven't had it forever, and I pop on their post and I'm like, hey, that's disgusting, you should try something else, I have imposed my context onto this individual. I have missed their context. I have ignored their expression of pain or insight or desire or conflict that they're dealing with. I haven't communicated. I've imposed myself into their world. They shared a context. They shared an experience about spaghetti, and I didn't hear it. This is the rub in communication, because we think that, I read the words, now I can just give them the response I want to give them. That's not how it works. For me, and especially in codependency, I had to work very, very, very diligently and hard to slow down my thinking, to clue into what they were conveying. And if I didn't understand the context, I needed to ask questions to gain that context. In that, I also had to become very aware of my own assumptions I would make about a person's context. Because sometimes that assumption, it's just not real. So I learned to take my assumptions and turn them into questions. So if I have an assumption of like, they let's say about the spaghetti, maybe they having tried other foods. Well, then I could change that into a question. I'm like, hey, yeah, I see that you're missing spaghetti. Is there any other foods that really work for you that way? Boom. It's empathetic. It's in context. It's a question. And questions work better in communication rather than just statements. A lot of times, if I have a hunch, for instance, like I have a hunch that something might be off here, like this is my intuitive attempt or perspective here, I'll turn that into a question rather than a statement, because I've learned over the years that assumptions aren't facts and they're not exactly accurate. And if I'm going to impose on my assumption or my intuition on someone, I'm actually making an assumption that it even matters or is relevant to their situation. See, one of our rubs in this is we have to step out of our context and lean into their context. Lean into at least attempting to understand and relate to their world, not our world. When we do that through questions, we do that by slowing things down. We do that by attempting to shape our awareness of their context through what they've shared. Now, the other flip side of this is the communicator, right? If I'm communicating and I don't put out pertinent facts that would be relevant to helping people, especially if I'm asking advice or guidance and I'm not giving them facts that would matter to that advice or guidance, I need to clarify that. So that shows up as, hey, I'm making this decision. This is what's going on. I'm really scared. And someone says, well, you need to make sure this isn't aligned and this isn't aligned, and you need to make sure this is done and that's done. Cool. If I've already done those things, but they're outlining that I need to do those things, that isn't an attack. That's not an insult. They're not thinking you're stupid. They're just responding to their awareness of what you shared in your post. So your job as a communicator, in my situation, if I was a communicator in that, my job would be to go in there and say, oh yeah, thank you for referencing that. I've done that. Here's some more details. I'm responsible for communicating the context as clearly as possible. It's so important, and it's a hard thing to do, especially in little boxes on computers. The digital medium for communication is fraught with minefields, because one thing we do, and I keep this as active in my brain as possible, hi Teresa, is my brain imposes tone on other people's words. It's like, oh, I'm reading this post, tone. I'm putting the tone in there. I have to be mindful of that, regardless of what the tone is. So when I am reading a post, I slow down and go, I'm going to take this from a positive intention, positive warm regard, and view it through that, rather than through maybe what my brain says should be the tone. It's a safer approach, because what it does is it assumes positive intent behind it, and then we can address it. Now, if I'm wrong about it, that'll become really clear, because they'll become aggressive in how they are communicating. But I like to check my sense first on that, because usually my knee-jerk reaction to a comment or a post isn't necessarily on target all the time. I've learned that it's less on target than it is on target. So I slow it down. I give myself some time to breathe with it. I do this in real communication, with real-time in-person communication as well. I'm like, hey, but in that we have tonality, we have nonverbal communication that we can look into. It's easier to gauge that. But if I'm not sure that what I am sharing or what I am hearing or receiving is clear to me, I'm going to ask a question rather than make an assumption. So I'll tell you, in codependency, we make assumptions. We had to make assumptions so that we could maintain our sense of safety and security when we're dealing with something that's toxic, a toxic person. But outside of the codependent dynamic, we need to become more direct, clear, and simple about our communication. That involves going, I have a question, I need to ask it. How that person responds to the question is going to inform me about what I will and won't do in the future with that individual. Healthy people are generally going to respond to the question in a constructive way. because they're going to come from a positive intention point of view, and they're going to go, wow, you're taking some time to pay attention to me and understand me. I'm going to share that. I'm going to give you more info. Most people are really sincere about trying to understand, and sometimes even with comments that aren't necessarily on target for what you need, there's a positive intention behind it. I can respond to that by going, I see, I sense your care and your regard for me, and that in the future, could you respond to me this way, as that would help me more. And it's a kind approach. It's a direct approach, and if you're the commenter who's getting a correction like that can feel a little attacking sometimes. That's something we have to confront in ourselves, because we don't deserve to be right in our communication. Like, if I say something that hurts someone, I need to understand that. I need to take some time to understand the impact I had there. I'm not just automatically entitled to what I said and to let it stand, because that's not how communication works. Communication isn't dictatorial. It's not an authoritarian approach. It's an exchange of vulnerability and understanding. So I gotta be mindful of that. If that's something you wrestle with, allow yourself to be corrected. Allow yourself to be informed about what they need, because that's how we build trust. That's how we build intimacy. It's how we maintain trust and intimacy. It's how we repair in relationships. So communication is going to be your biggest challenge. It's the number one thing that I rub up against all the time. It's my challenge. Slowing things down, gaining context, building understanding of their world, and then leaning into that nuance that comes from them. That's the messy of communication, because I don't come from communication to be right or wrong. A lot of people do, because they want to be right. That's where they have their sense of power. It's where they feel the most safe. But that doesn't communicate anything. That just creates a war. That breaks things down, and it damages trust. It damages intimacy, and it impairs our ability to feel connected and feel safe. If we come from a reach to understanding, and understanding takes energy. It takes empathy. It takes slowing it down. It takes writing out our responses before we post a response or before we say a response. It's a mindfulness act to sit there and go, I need to just let this sit and let it stew for a bit. I do that all the time, because I personally have this craving to have effective communication in my world, because it makes it so much safer. And when we make mistakes, we can make the repair. We can lean in and go, I see how I screwed it up. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with who we are or wrong with us. It's really about a skill. When we separate skill from identity, skill from worth, it becomes easier to receive correction. It becomes easier to grow our effectiveness in communicating who we are and building that understanding that we all really crave. Now, when we come from dynamics where we were abused verbally, where we were ignored and neglected in communication, where we were controlled through communication, which is what I call dictatorial telling. It's not communication, it's commands. We're going to be very activated at times when we are confronted with something, whether it's a post and a topic that shows up on that, whether it's how someone communicates a thing, whether it's a tone. And we got to slow that down. We got to regulate our nervous system. You can use that in the Be Calm tool set. We have to build a little more capacity to allow ourselves to be there and take care of our needs that arise in a communication. And then, if and when we want, lean into understanding their space. Now, there's nuance to this, because if this is happening in a primary relationship, it's going to be a very delicate step-by-step approach that can feel really difficult to do, because we're activated, they're activated, we're both scared that we're going to get hurt, or we're scared that it affects the attachment bond. We're scared that it might end something. We might be in a triggered or activated state where we need to be regulating ourselves. All understandable. But you understanding you in that space is where your power is. It's not about them necessarily doing something. It's about you doing it. It's about, oh, I'm activated. I just need to take a break. Just need to ease back. Because I know where this goes for me, and I know what I need right now. And it's okay to put a pause on a communication and go take your time to let it process, to let yourself land with it, to let yourself wrestle with it, so you can understand who you want to be and what you need in that situation. That's the messiness of communication. Because if we're going to go for understanding, we're going to have to first be very understanding of ourselves. We have to build a lot of work into building our own capacity to understand ourselves. Because authentic, genuine, safe communication is vulnerable, and it can be very activating at times, especially with difference, with conflict, with mistakes, with hurts, with changes that will happen, with commitments that have to be changed. It's a very challenging experience, but that's how intimacy is. When we leave codependency, we are going to be, find a different word for that. We're going to be in conflict with these things because they're uncomfortable to us. They're abnormal to us, and that they can activate things within us, bring up in us insecurities or fears. This is our opportunity to understand ourselves better so that we're more able to care for what we need so that we can improve communication. Because you can't have relationship without communication. It doesn't exist beyond it. It is one of the primary elements of it. The trust being the other. If you have any kind of relationship, communication and trust are essential, or you don't have a relationship. You either have a dictatorship, or you have a nightmare, or you have nothing. There's just nothing happening. So we'll be doing more on communication, especially as we work through the relationship strategy and as we work with healing our trauma that came in through communication. How we were not seen or received, how we were condemned for who we are, or for how we showed up, or for what we needed. And for the abuse that was transacted through communication. Because verbal abuse is extremely altering. It's very difficult to work out. And so coming at this from compassion is really, really important, both for ourselves and for those we're communicating with. And that's where the positive, warm regard comes in. There are some limits to that. Name calling is not acceptable. We don't name call. I don't. It's not an appropriate thing. It's an attack. We don't attack people's character or their intention. We address behavior. Behavior is reasonable. It's like, hey, this behavior doesn't work for me. This would work better. Boom. And that's partly in communication. So, yeah. I know today probably feels a little blunt. We've had some real challenges in the community with this. And so part of this is in response to that. Part of this is just sharing the reality of what we're working with, because we're all just trying to figure this out. And I think that deserves the most acknowledgement we can offer. So generally, we're innocent in our best attempts. That doesn't mean the attempt was effective all the time, but it does mean that we can honor that while correcting the attempt, because that's what respect allows for. That's what we deserve. That's what matters to us. Sometimes people, the way they show up and how they do things just doesn't work for us. That doesn't mean they're wrong. It just doesn't mean it works for us. And at that point, we always have the option to disengage from communication. We are not obligated to communicate with someone who wants to communicate with us. Nobody's entitled to it. So this is something that we can boundary. It's something we can manage according to what works for us, to what we need in our world, and what we have capacity for. Because I'll tell you, some days I have lots of capacity. Sometimes I have little. Capacity is this idea of how much do I have to give? How much can I tolerate or receive? And so I tend to look at it as cups. And some cups are bigger than others, right? And some days our cups are different sizes. Other people put this in the terms of spoons. They only have so much to offer, so much to give. So, thank you guys for your support. I appreciate you. I mean that. I know this is hard work. I'm a little different than a lot of other coaches that I've seen in this category of coaching. As they tend to run communities and they let the community do its own thing. I'm actually very involved in the community. And it's designed as a playground, as a world in which, a space in which we can explore and discover ourselves through, work on skills, that we can have a haven where we can make mistakes and be understood, and we will be held accountable. And if violations of those things happen on a, like 2 or 3 times, we remove people from the community when that happens. That's because I approach people from the state of adulthood. We're adults. Let's respect that. Let's understand that. And let's grow. Okay? So, yeah, that's it. I appreciate you. Let's see. One thing I think to be aware of, Monday, which is January 4th, the Reclaiming Innocence course opens up for enrollment. That course is part of what I have, or what is called the, God, Marshall, today is a day. That course is part of a membership I offer called the Heal Yourself membership. This membership is a low-cost, high-value membership. It starts at $49 a month, or you can get lifetime for $597. And what it does is it gets you access to my primary core healing systems. One of them is the Reclaiming Innocence course that starts January 18th, so enrollment will start on the 4th for that. And then the upcoming Heal Yourself strategy for codependency. It also gets you access to bi-weekly live mentoring hours where you can work with me in a group format, get you support and understanding and guidance into your situation, point you at tools and practices that'll work for you. And you get access to the live trainings that I offer in that membership. Not all my courses are part of that, like the relationship strategy is not a part of that, nor is the Know Yourself or happiness strategies part of that. But it is my offering. It's my response to the needs that we have in our world, especially in this portion of the community where a lot of us don't have a whole lot available and we really need the help. Well, there you go. That is an option, and I invite you to take that opportunity and find out for yourself how these things work for you. So watch out for that link. We'll be starting that on Monday. Keep yourself safe out there. Remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. And I will see you guys in our next video. Have fun. Bye-bye.